Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Hello, and thank you for listening to the Leader U podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a dear friend of mine, Ann Swanson. She is the Director of Region 5 Small Business Development Centers at Idaho State University College of Business. In this position, Ann is responsible for helping local businesses grow and improve their bottom lines. She has an entrepreneurial career path that includes work as a marketing director, gerontologist, health administrator, professor, actor, and consultant. Ann began working in digital communications in 2000. Her career includes and marketing director at Portneuf Medical Center, marketing director and teacher at Idaho State University's College of Business, and small business owner. She has 2 master's degrees from the University of Southern California and lived for a year in Barcelona, Spain on a Fulbright. Ann joined the Idaho Small Business Development Center in 2012. She has 2 children, ages 14 and 16, and loves to travel, teach yoga, and find her keys.
Yes, just in time for today. I found them. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you could make it here. You found your keys. And
thank you.
Found your way
Pleasure.
down to beautiful, stormy Pocatello in the middle of winter.
If you don't find any joy in the snow, there's this quote that goes with it. But I don't remember what it is because I have a hard time finding joy in the snow.
Me too.
You'll have less joy and more snow.
Yeah.
I think that's how it goes.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
So
thank you
now
for
we
being
have
here.
more snow.
Yeah. So, well, there's a variety of reasons I had you on the podcast. One is I just see you as a really prominent leader in our community and at the university and in the business development world. We have used your services and found you to be delightful. And
Thanks. Hope I can live up to it.
And
Good.
very knowledgeable and just willing to help. And we have a lot of entrepreneurs and people that listen to our podcast that might not know about the Small Business Development Center. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But I first want to start off with your story. When you were a little girl, did you dream of working for a Small Business Development Center?
I'm not sure that any little girl or boy has that vision when they're young. No. I pretty much from an early age knew I wanted to be an actor, communicator. And so when I graduated from high school and went to college, I initially studied marketing and journalism and then moved over to performance. So I caught the performance bug pretty early in my life, made my big debut at Idaho State University Fraser Hall in the 4th grade and as a no-neck monster.
Oh,
so,
wow.
That was my part.
What a visual.
Yeah, right. I didn't. Yes, that's a different podcast, but yes. So I went through undergrad and came out with a speech and theater degree and then went on to pursue a career in professional acting. That it took about 9 years of my life. It was challenging and ultimately not very lucrative. But in the meantime, as an actor, especially if you're living in LA and doing, really busting it around the interstates and trying to do your auditions and things, you actually use a lot of and develop a lot of marketing skills. Self-promotion is the name of the game in that.
Absolutely.
And so I used a lot of my communications background promoting myself. I wish I could say that it turned into a high-flying movie career, but it didn't. So I went to graduate school at the University of Southern California and became a gerontologist, which is the study of aging. It's a social science. And then at the same time, I got a degree in health administration. So a lot of business classes, finance, things like that. So some grounding in business and then some grounding in social science too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all through that time, though, I was exercising my marketing and communications muscles, doing student government in grad school. And then I had a great opportunity to go to Spain on a Fulbright, and so I I polished, so to speak. It's a little rusty now, my Spanish, and then came back here to Pocatello, got the marketing job at Portneuf Medical Center, and then that transitioned to marketing director at the College of Business, and then that finally finally landed me at the Small Business Development Center. They were looking for someone to do marketing consulting for small business, so I stepped into that role, and then found myself the director of that program in 2015.
Cool. What a story.
Yeah, lots of twists and turns. Backwards through the back door is kind of how I describe that.
Yeah, and it's definitely kind of like a plot twist, right? Like an acting thing. Right?
Yeah.
You had a plan, and there was a script you had, and it didn't quite turn out that way.
Yeah, and really, it's a highly competitive career, and so many people want to do it. But there were some lessons built in there. One of them that I really appreciated from an acting teacher long ago was be a production-proof actor. And when you're a production-proof actor, it means you can be in a really bad show and you can still be really good in it. And being production-proof is, of course, you can apply that to anything that you do. If you're in a bad job, or if you have a bad boss, or if you're involved in a project that just isn't turning out well, then you can still be your own best. And
that's a huge lesson.
It's your reputation that follows you, not the project for the rest of your life. So production-proof actor. So I hope I
that's the wisdom
that circle there a little bit.
Not only that, but you're giving us wisdom right from the beginning. We're not even at the end where I'm asking you. That's a good one.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's a good one. Production-proof.
That's all I got. No, I think I maybe have a few more nuggets, but yeah, production-proof actor for sure.
Awesome. That's cool. So how long have you been in that role at ISU as far as SBDC?
Yeah, I've been at the SBDC since 2015 as the director, and then I did consulting work for them before that time. So it's been about going on 14 years almost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Time flies.
I know. It's been a good job. I've liked it, enjoyed it quite a bit.
That's awesome. Well, I've enjoyed your expertise, and we've referred quite a few people to you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So our experience with the SBDC is just like they're always there to help. You and Claudia. It's just been like it. If we ask, there's some answer that we can get. And whether that be for ourselves or people that we're mentoring, because we do a lot of mentorship, and so. It helps solidify and create a framework that it's new to people, right? Like oftentimes, like we didn't know what we're doing. We're good at our craft, but we're not great at the whole business side of things, right?
Right.
And I don't want to go to business school. I want to do the job, and I want to, do the thing that I'm good at, but I need help along the way.
Yeah. So for those listeners who may not know what the Small Business Development Center is, we are funded by taxpayer dollars to provide no-cost consulting and low-cost training to any small business. So if you're in earshot of this and have business questions, it's free to come and see us as much as you'd like. Yeah. The point that you make about people wanting to do what they're passionate about and not necessarily the other stuff that goes along with a business, I think is really well taken. There's a book I really like that I think illustrates this well, and that's called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Are you familiar with that book? So in that book, he breaks down a business into sort of three key components, or you could think of them as three key actors. And that's the entrepreneur, the idea person, the passion, the manager. The manager's the one that's got the operations, jobs, and needs to make sure things are, products are getting from one place to another. And then finally, the technical person who can actually sit down and deliver complicated work to clients, right? And I think what can be difficult about small business is that one person, that one entrepreneur that comes into my office when they're starting out really has to be all three of those things. They have to be the visionary entrepreneur, they've got to be the manager, and they've got to be the technical expert.
And the marketing specialist.
Right. I put that in management. But anyway,
Okay.
yeah, this book, The E-Myth, really breaks that down and helps. I think it can help people when they understand that they don't need to expect themselves to be all those things. And then working with the Small Business Development Center, we can help kind of fill in the gaps. So if really you're a technician at heart, you're a great craftsperson, then we can help you bring together, find somebody to do your books for you and teach you, basic financial management. If you're the visionary, then we can help you with understanding how to hire the right employees. So you have folks that can do your managing and your technical work. So part of my job is helping people that come through my door understand which of those they're strongest at, and then find resources to help support that strength.
Yeah, that's so good. And I can see how there's a lot of vetting and questions and curiosity when you have your clients coming in to find out what exactly do you know, what do you not know, what is going to be your obstacles, and many years of experience probably gives you some pattern recognition too.
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you give an example?
Yeah. So somebody asked me the other day, do you know when a business is going to fail before they even start? And I think that, I that's sort of a negative place to talk from, but I think that I'll flip that around and talk about what a small business can do to really, put some resources in the bank so they aren't betting against themselves going in. And so the first thing to do that a lot of people skip because they're that visionary, they're that entrepreneur, is taking the time to do research, to do the right research. So before you get the lease, before you get all the inventory in, work with either the SBDC or another trusted business partner to analyze the market. You want to open a coffee shop? How many coffee shops are there in Pocatello? Is there really room for another? By the way, the answer from my personal perspective is no.
Yeah, me too.
At this point. So taking the time to understand your market and then also research your competitors. And those are actually, when you have a rubric or a guide to do that, that's what we have and do. It's not really that hard, and we can certainly help with that. So making sure to do the research, and then if you don't like numbers and financial management, I'm not sitting in my office with a client, so I'm going to take a chance here and be blunt. If you're not willing to learn and you're not willing to understand it, you should not go into business for yourself, because you have to understand or be willing to understand your numbers. Even if you're not the bookkeeper, even if you outsource it, you've got to, or your business, your dream will have a difficult time getting off the ground.
But you can absolutely ask for help in that area.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yes, but a business person fundamentally has to know what's happening in the numbers of their business. It's not optional. And then the other thing I like to mention when I have conversations like this is it's okay not to be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is sort of they're the celebrity scions of our our capitalist network, right? Our system. And I'm not a small business person, but it truly is not for everybody.
Right.
And I think sometimes people, a part of their dream is seeing themselves as that, celebrity, successful person, and that the entrepreneur is sort of the pinnacle of the American dream. And I just want to say publicly that it's okay if it's not. I mean, we need people who can be production proof in all kinds of capacities in our business world. And having been a business coach, and I have had my own small businesses over the years, but I don't prefer it. I mean, I really love what I do. And being in that capacity, helping others, I understand if they find out it's not really for them after doing some of that initial research.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually part of the importance of the research is knowing what you're up against.
Yes, for sure.
Like not only competition, but just bandwidth.
Bandwidth. Yes.
I mean, bandwidth.
That's key.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do this exercise with clients sometimes about who their partners are in their small business. And partners are anybody that you really need on your side in order to make things go smoothly or have the best chance of getting off the ground. And family is a huge one.
Right.
And other demands in your life are really important to consider. And a lot of times people don't think about or believe me sometimes when I say how much work it is to get a small business off the ground. It's an incredible amount of work.
Yeah.
And you know that. You've been through it. And then once you get it off the ground, it's a little bit easier to keep off the ground.
And people think, oh, I want to do that because they see your success and they think it's going to happen to them this year. So I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do that this year. Well, they don't see the 5 years that you put into it before the tulips you planted in the fall that come in the spring. Like,
Yes.
It is all seed planting and cultivation and doing a lot of free work.
Yes.
And a lot of free work and
Yeah.
having to have a real job to do that on the side. You can't. I mean, you can if you have money, but if you're an average person who needs to work to keep your family afloat, it isn't just something you just stop your job and then you just start this
Yes.
business, because the business takes 3 to 5 years to really cultivate.
That's right. That's right. And I think you're in that position now.
Yeah.
I mean, I met you and Rob probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And it's taken you a lot of hard work to get where you are now, where you've got a lot of momentum and your client network is growing and you were able to make this your full-time gig.
Right.
Right. But you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I talk to clients about is the lean startup model. And that means taking your business idea and getting it on its feet with the least amount of capital outlay and time outlay and commitment outlay, really, that you possibly can. So you're running these little tiny tests. And that's something that we're really good at helping people figure out. So instead of, I'm going to buy a big shop out south of town, and I'm going to buy a snowplow and a bunch of small farm equipment and become a master landscaper and just open this business. That's my dream. Okay, great. That's a great dream. But as this lean startup would advise, or this practice would say, start with a lawnmower and your very own truck and see if you can build a small number of lawns in year one, or take on one job, rent the equipment.
Absolutely.
So I think that that kind of coaching is so important for small business people to have in order to manage that bandwidth issue. And it's both time and money.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In which it comes into energy, right? Like how much you can do when you're getting sucked out of all of your finances or the time that you have. Like, I love that concept. And we've done a little coaching with our kids too. And I think that, like, my son and his wife have a business that they're doing that in Boise. It's called, it's a wedding, it's a event planning, and it's day of, but they did that lean concept, and they've been a year. They didn't buy a bunch of equipment. They didn't buy chairs. They didn't buy, all the stuff for the wedding. And they're even to the point where they're not doing the planning. They're doing the day before and the day of coordinators. They're the ones that show up and make the mom and the bride have a great day and not be stressing out. But they've really minimized all of the other things that they could do, especially when they're starting out, if they want to grow into that. But they're also dabbling in putting their feet in to see what they really like. They started with doing all of the wedding, and then they're like, yeah, I don't really like that as much. So sometimes when you just go all in without really knowing what it feels like to do that, or if you're going to get an opportunity to volunteer, sometimes I think for people like, let's say you're into food trucking, you want to be a food truck owner. Have you ever owned a food truck?
Or you ever worked in one?
Have you ever worked in one?
Yeah.
Could you go work a day
Right.
or two or for a couple weeks and see yourself doing this?
Right.
I think sometimes we have this vision of something being something. When we get to it, it's not exactly what we thought it was. And so that's the part of the research. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I'm so glad you brought that story up about your children's event planning business, because it's a really good example of why Lean Startup is such an important concept in starting a business, because not only are you really minimally investing, you're not putting your farm on the line, but you're also minimally investing in what you think you would love to do. And you never know what would reveal itself through this Lean Startup process. Like your example noted, they decided they didn't like doing this part of wedding planning, and maybe they've really stumbled onto a niche in the wedding planning industry that no one else is in.
Yeah.
And if you're already tied in and invested into chair rentals, well, you probably don't have the bandwidth to notice that or move on that.
Absolutely, because then you have a storage unit, and then you have to have a truck to store that to
Yes.
carry them, and then you have to have somebody set them up for the times when you're at this event, and this person
Exactly.
doesn't want that, so it gets chaotic. I'm even thinking of our business. We didn't know that was what it was called at the time, but what I recognize is that we were Lean Startup. We didn't start
You
out with
definitely were.
we didn't start with a podcast and an office and
Right.
office equipment. We were working from home and getting clients. We both still had full-time jobs. Rob still has his, but literally didn't take anything besides. It's thought. It's really thought stuff. It's not, there's no we are the product. So that's
Yes.
the different too.
Yeah.
That's a thought leadership space, a knowledge economy versus a product or a thing. Right? That's a different. It's a different thing. But it's also, we could have went out with, we need to have an office space, and we need to have this, and we need to have all the best equipment, and we need to have a nice car, and we could do all of that stuff. But I don't think we would have been as successful, because you just don't know what everything's going to cost. You don't know, you might get a really big client this month, but you don't know that there's going to be one the next month, right? Or the next week. So minimizing all of that external, all of those things, so that you can also find out what you like doing. I started to learn who I want to work with, what I want to do, what I don't want to do. And same thing with Rob. Like, he's like, nope, not doing that anymore, right? And so that's helpful too, because then you start to evolve with your business and go, what's fueling me and what's draining me.
Exactly.
And for us, it's finances. We're not your people that are going to come in and help your business financially. That will refer you on.
Yeah.
But we will ask for help in that area and get coaching so that we understand our stuff. But do we love doing the financial piece of it? No.
Yeah, and you don't have to.
Yeah.
And you should absolutely outsource things that you don't love. But you still got to understand them a little bit, which
for
I
sure.
think you do.
Yeah.
So I think the Lean Startup model, too, can be applied. It can be a lens you can look through to anything that you're doing in your life. Like, I want to become a yoga instructor, or I want to start doing volunteer work at the pet shelter. Or there's always I haven't met a scenario yet where you can't start small in something. I'm sure they exist. Comments below, all of that. I'm sure they exist, but anything can really start small.
Absolutely. Get your toes wet. You don't have to take a deep dive into and see if you like it. And that's what I was actually having a conversation earlier about volunteering. And I think that's a role that when you can ask if you can job shadow or volunteer to help somebody.
Yes.
And to learn, not only do you learn about the job, but you learn some of the tricks of the trade and what's worked best. It's kind of a mentorship opportunity.
Yes.
It is the National Mentoring Month. I learned that January is that. So thinking about it from a mentorship, who do you have as your mentors too? The Small Business Development Center is one way to get mentorship.
Yes, for sure. And a lot of people, not a lot, maybe less than I'd like, use us that way. But I will take one moment and plug for working with a mentor regularly or the Small Business Development Center. The one client I had this year that reached $1 million in sales in his first year in business
Wow.
was the one client who meets with me every 2 weeks, almost without fail.
Wow.
And so having someone that you can regularly, and it doesn't have to be the SBDC, it could be a business partner or, another mentor in your life, but having someone you can regularly bounce things off of and get another third perspective on is so helpful because it can really, I think the biggest benefit is it really helps you make the most of your time because you find out what you need to stop spinning your wheels about pretty quickly. And I think that's, for the client I'm thinking of, that's really how I was most helpful to him. It's like, you really don't need to keep worrying about this, or we're going to solve this today in this session. So, mentorship is so valuable.
Yeah, asking for help in general. Like,
Yes.
when you're in the weeds and in the trenches, as any new business owner is, you don't have perspective. You have your perspective. You have a perspective. You're not able to zoom out as much as somebody who's not in it. It's like coaching. Right?
Sure.
It's the same kind of thing. Like when you're in the trenches, it's super hard for you to see through the forest through the trees. But somebody else can come in and offer, oh, have you even thought about this? And they don't even have to be in your industry.
Right.
But they have an idea and they see things from a completely different vantage point, a little different perspective. And then all of a sudden it's like, why didn't I think of that? Well, because you're in the weeds.
Yeah. And I have my blind spots too, right? We all do.
Right.
And
That's why they're called blind spots.
That's right. Maybe you'll tell me what mine are after this. I don't know.
We can help each other.
Right.
Yeah. So Small Business Development Center, great resource for the communities. So people that don't live around here, how do they find their small business development centers?
So Small Business Development Centers are available to every county and territory in the United States. And I'm hoping for my transfer to the U.S. Virgin Islands, SBDC, they have one there. So you can look online, Small Business Development Center, and put in the state where you live, and you will find the right contact. And there's somebody close to you who can help. And in Idaho, we offer a lot of remote appointments too. So some of my rural clients, I'll call in through Zoom. So there's a lot of easy ways to get to us.
Awesome. And lots of times they're on college campuses too.
SBDCs are usually hosted by an educational institution. I'd say probably 95% of them are.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
that also adds to the resources that we can pull in for your business. I have 5 clients that are doing extensive market analysis, competitor analysis projects with us this spring. So there's a lot of nice added resources having a university host.
Awesome. That's cool. So I'm thinking about women in business, particularly. I know one of the events that you put on every year that's so fabulous. I was going to say fantastic and fabulous. It's fanabulous, but the Women's Business Symposium.
Yeah, excellent time.
And so is there any kind of differences when it comes to women-owned businesses?
I'm not sure that there are differences in business specifically that are set apart from women's sort of ways of being in the world. Certainly, there's been a lot of research about the fact that women, for example, don't negotiate as often or as strongly as men do. So one of our Women's Business Symposium breakouts last year was about salary negotiation. Women oftentimes will be more interested in providing, in becoming leaders who have power to do things rather than power over others. And so sometimes developing women leaders and women leaders in business, it takes them a little extra insight to understand that they're kind of a different priority sometimes when women step into business leadership. I would say women bring a more ethical thinking to the forefront of their businesses than some men do, although that's certainly not all. And I think women in business sometimes don't have access to as much of the capital as some of our male business folks do. And, if there's another podcast about that, why that might be. But all of those, keeping all of that in mind, over 50% typically of our clients are women. And there's really no difference in my experience between women being successful versus men being successful. It really comes down to, are you teachable? Are you passionate? And are you able to leverage other resources? And if you can do those three things, then success, given that there's a market and an audience for you, then your success has a much higher chance than those that don't. And that really doesn't fall along gender lines either. Right. Some people have those kinds of qualities, and some people just don't. And that's okay. You can still get a government job like me and be a happy person in life,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially if you land to the place, you've done the consulting, you've had some businesses, and you know what's for you, you know what's not. And you also, I guarantee if you had a really overbearing boss and you had no autonomy in that role, it doesn't matter, you would probably be out of there. So like you have the perfect environment to.
Yes, that's a great point to bring up. And I think it also speaks to another small business issue. Notice how I bring everything back around to that. But having work that fuels the spirit, having work where you feel excited or at least not dreading coming to work today, having a job where you have high autonomy, having a workplace where people feel seen and heard and rewarded, that is something that I try to extend. I have that at my job, and I really appreciate that. I have two bosses. They're both great, and I do mostly what I want to do to get my job done. I try to extend the importance of that to businesses. And there's such a tight market for employees, and it really is crucial that gets paid attention to, is how your business is showing up, not only for your customers, but for your external customers, but for your internal customers too.
Whatever you treat your internal customers like comes out to your external customers.
That's a great point.
It really does. Yeah. Or students.
Yeah.
Right. You can't be student focused if you're not employee focused.
Yes.
You have to really love the people that work for you and make your mission possible. And then that actually comes out. And there's always outliers and things like that, but really if we can just make our work environments a place where people want to be, we don't have as much attrition, fallout, and that'll cost money too. And there's other places for people to work.
For sure.
We found that out.
Yeah. And if I do reflect on my own clients that I've seen achieve success over the years, they're all people who have put thought into that. Like how, if I've got unhappy employees, they've asked, why, how could we do this better? And I think they don't always tell me if my advice worked, but I think most of the time I find out that things really do shift a little bit. And I think the work that you and Rob do is really that intensified. And I've, of course, referred people to you, employers to you too, to help with that, to instituting a place where just frankly, people want to come every day.
Right. They're spending the majority of their lives there and more time there than they are with their families.
Good point.
And so let's at least make it might not have every task that you want to do in the job, but at least the environment can be pleasant, right? Some tasks may be not as fun as others, but
absolutely.
But are you able to talk, speak, be seen, be heard, bring your voice to the table, all of those things.
Yeah.
Super
do you feel
important.
welcome in the lunchroom even?
Right. Yeah. Are you bullied?
Yeah. Right. And that is, I have always had the great luck to work with the exception of one, work in really great environments with bosses I admired. Even back when I was in college working in the catering kitchen, I had a boss named Ellen who was a really great boss. And she was firm but kind and fun and, empathetic, all of those things. And
That's cool.
And that when I think of the boss, one of the first bosses I really admire, it was her. As I was preparing for this today, I also put down that we all have difficult people.
Yes.
There are difficult people,
Yes.
but we don't have to live with them. And that means, for me, living in my home with them. So I've gracefully exited some difficult people I was living with in my past. But it also means at work. I mean, you shouldn't have to live with really difficult people in your job and in your business. If you've got really difficult employees, it's time to part. If you're in a job where you show up and you are surrounded by difficult people and you don't have allies, it's probably time to depart. So that's been one of my kind of whole life, 360 degrees of my own life policies that I've tried, or values that I've tried to live by, is that we do have to deal with difficult people, but we shouldn't have to live with them. And ultimately that helps me have a peaceful life, which is sort of my internal kind of reason of being.
Me
right?
too. That's my measure of success.
Yeah. How
Peace.
much peace. And it's not going to be like that 24/7, but are we always coming back to that?
Within your choice.
Yes.
Right?
You're returning to that. So.
Yeah. I love that. And we can't control external things, but that is something that you said was internal. In your business.
Yes.
In your house.
Yes.
In your life. Those are choices.
Yep. And if there are difficult people in my life, one of my first priorities is to try to politely move away. If that is possible. It's not always, but
Sometimes they're not
that.
even aware. Sometimes they're not even aware.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
There's a lot of conversations that need to happen.
Good
and,
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then are you aware of this? And giving feedback, and then giving them opportunities, because oftentimes people don't know.
That's really a good
nobody
point.
really thinks they are the jerk. Hey, it's
Yeah.
me. It's me. I'm
right,
the jerk.
Right. Blind spot. Fully cop to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think having really brave conversations is hard. Crucial and hard. And I think it's so important that you brought that up. If there are difficult people in your life, you have a responsibility to them and to yourself to, at first, try to have a conversation with them about that. Absolutely, 100% behind that.
We always say feedback equals love. And it's
Yes.
loving to tell someone. It's not
Yes.
loving to talk about them.
That's right. That's right. Direct communication. There's a conversation right now I have got to have with someone face to face, and honestly, I put it off for 6 weeks.
Do you want to walk through it? We can script it out right now.
I think I can't, just for probably anonymity's sake for this person, but I know the skills, but it's still scary.
Yeah.
But necessary.
Yeah. Doesn't mean just because it's hard doesn't mean we can just put it off. We have to do these things. It is actually loving. I think some of us think it's mean or they won't like you, but the reality is it's so much more helpful if most people are like, oh, I didn't know, or I had no idea that I was doing this. But we have these psychic thoughts, I call them, or a couple of friends and I could call them the psychic thoughts. And that is how they're going to respond.
Yep.
Me and my psychic thoughts. They're going to think this or they're
Yep.
going to do this. And it's like, you don't know that. They could actually say thank you.
They could. And it's also okay to have these conversations badly.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm afraid to have one, I just think to myself, all right, I'm just going to go do it. And it's even okay if it's bad.
Yep.
It doesn't work out how I want, or I mess it up, or I don't say the perfect movie scripted thing.
Yeah. I even say, what's worst case scenario?
Yeah,
They won't
good.
like me anymore.
Right.
Or they'll be pissed off at me. And then I go, I can live with that.
Yeah.
I mean, like, really, that's what I'm afraid of.
For sure.
And so then I go, okay, so they might be mad at me or whatever. And then, but but honestly, I'd rather they respect me than like me.
And I'd rather respect myself too.
Me
It's a
too.
self-respect thing too.
Absolutely.
To have the courage to
To say
sit
it.
down with those people
Yep.
that you're feeling difficult with.
Yeah, and script is great. It's just maybe you won't stay on script. Sometimes I've even coached people to have the conversation, to write it all down.
Yep.
And then say, I have all of these things that I want to talk to you about, and I'd like it if you could just wait till I get to the end, because this is very difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
And once I get done sharing my thoughts, I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback.
That's a great setup.
Because you've written it down, you've been mindful, you don't want to be emotionally hijacked when you're giving it. You're just telling them, this is the circumstances, I felt like this is, or, I'm feeling this way. When you did this, I felt this. When you did this, I felt this. And then, but don't give them the opportunity to pounce on you right then. Because some people get so defensive right away.
Yeah, I'm just writing this down here. Like, okay, from my conversation with that person.
I've written this down. This is difficult. I don't enjoy this, but it's a conversation that needs to happen, and I care about you. And so I want to work through this. Like there's a reason I'm doing this. It's not to come down on you. It's because I care. Yeah. If I didn't, I'd be talking shit about your back, behind your back right now.
Which exactly. Which I admit I have done a small amount of, which is only more of a sign to me that I need to have this crucial conversation with this person.
And sometimes I find if I catch myself in a conversation like that with someone else, I know that I need to have that conversation. Generally, I'm not really venting about that person. I'm trying to find a way to, like, how do I have this conversation? Or have you ever been in this predicament? When it's helpful, you're trying to gain some insight on what ways could you deal with this kind of thing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that's a great idea, actually, is to try it out on somebody else.
Yeah.
How do you think I should deal with this?
Yeah.
Make an outline, all of that.
Because they're not emotionally involved.
Right.
They don't, it's like, oh yeah. Or they might say, well, have you ever seen it from this perspective? And you're like, oh no, I've only been looking at it from my point of view too. And then you're like, whoa. So I think one of the things that's come out of this is perspective taking is huge in being able to ask for other people's perspective, ask for their feedback. But oftentimes I see people get so afraid of asking for help. It's an ego thing, right?
I think it's an ego thing, and I also think it's a schedule time thing.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And just bringing this back to small business, I mean, small business is consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people just think, I just got to do this myself. I got to do it today. I can't take time to go talk to anybody about it or get a new resource going. And that's the barrier I probably see the most.
Mm-hmm.
Fear certainly plays into that. But it is a real gift. It's a way of taking care of yourself in your business to get help and ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
It is the nicest thing you can do for yourself in your business.
It's kind and self-compassionate, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and honestly, I hear people that, and I coach people through that process, and that's a mindset of, I can't do this. In fact, the last coaching session I was just on, I called somebody out for saying, I always am doing this because I'm always at work and I'm never at home and I'm blah, 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 blah. And I just stopped him right there and I said, Kate, that is not the truth. You're not always ever doing anything, and you're not never doing anything either. Those are two words that we don't even use in our house anymore.
Always and never.
Always, or we use them like this. You always never do the dishes.
Great workaround.
So, but if you think about it, if you say always and never, you're actually lying. Because nobody always does something or never does something. You're creating a story that will help you get out of something. Or you're not communicating very effectively.
Yes.
You're not. You could say, when you do this, I don't like this. Or I feel like this. When you do this, I don't like that. I'm struggling with this. Take responsibility for your own emotions, right? And like work through what it is instead of blaming. That's just a victim mindset if you think about it. Right?
Yep. And those are
hard to get out of.
That's interesting. The victim's mindset is a tough one. I was talking to a counselor friend of mine. I said, there's anybody that ever comes to your office that you really can't help? And they said, yes, someone who's stuck in victim mindset.
Mm-hmm.
You have to want to care about yourself and have agency.
Yeah.
And that's on a personal level and on a business level.
And this particular person that I was coaching, I'm super happy because they're willing to hear that even. They're willing to hear it
Oh,
and
they're
go,
3/4 of the way there.
right. So that they've already removed the barriers that were right out in front of them of I'm always doing, and he was super open to it. And I've said, I tell you this because I know I've said these things. I mean, I've learned these things the hard way. They're not helpful for relationships. Always endeavoring on people, right?
Oh,
Or shoulding.
really?
None of those things really.
Learn that the hard way.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And so that's some of the wisdom that I think we can bring, that whole pattern recognition, understanding when you're in victim mindset, understanding it's okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. Vulnerability is actually a sign of courage.
Yes. Thank you, Brene Brown.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
She kind of led that charge at it. Yeah, it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And the more often I take a chance on doing that, the more often I'm pleasantly surprised with the outcome, too.
Me too.
And
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, just saying. That can even just be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get an insurance on a snowplow, or never been asked that before.
Right.
Or, I don't know where you send your recipe to get tested for acidity, but I'm going to find out.
Right. That is cool.
Yeah.
And don't you find it's cool when you learn something new like that?
Absolutely.
And you just like,
I do know where to send your recipe to get tested for acidity and shelf life now.
oh, awesome.
Because once upon a time, I certainly didn't.
Yeah. That's an awesome day when you learn something new.
Yes. Yeah. I have a lot of very random information like that, having worked with small businesses of all types for so long.
I
So,
bet. One of the things I see you as also, and you brought it up today, is a really strong negotiator. And I think that it's something I admire in you, and that you share that skill with others through the Small Business SBDC, the Women's Business Symposium. But I know you've had to advocate for yourself. Can you share like an experience that you've had where you knew you weren't getting paid as much as the male in a role
sure.
type thing?
Yeah. So that actually happened about more like 5 years ago, I think. I had gone through this salary negotiation training through the University Businesswomen. It's a national organization. So I'd been sharing this salary negotiation information, and then I realized I needed to apply it to myself. And so one of the first platforms of negotiation is data gathering. And so I had a hunch that my salary was quite low relative to what our grant contract said and relative to other folks who had similar education levels or were also running similar kind of level programs in the college. And so the first thing I did was I went and looked to see what other people were making, who were my peers, more or less. TransparentIdaho.org. Yep. If you're a state employee, your salary's public. Yep. So I started gathering data. I also did some national data gathering on, I think, salary.com. The Idaho labor website has a lot of salary data too, what medians and high ends and low ends are. So I started gathering data, and I put together a package of all this data, and I put it in front of our budget officer and said, "Hi, I think that we need a change in compensation here based on all of my data." And what the beautiful thing is about data is that it's completely impersonal. It's not really a matter of 'cause I think some folks, when they hear the word negotiation, there's this idea that you have to come in tough, or you have to come, like, you kind of have to be like a poker player, or there's some, I don't know, act to it almost. But really good negotiation starts with really good data. And so I presented that initially to our budget officer. And then based on that, she took that going forward and got it basically pushed through. I had an advocate, though. I mean, really have to give credit to Deb Gerber, who advocated for me within the system. And that's really helpful if you have an advocate. So that worked really well for me. That's the happy ending. I'll tell you the happy ending before the darker story was I had actually asked for that about 4 years prior. And at the time, I even had a female boss who I had run this through at the SBDC side. And I remember kind of pitching this to her sort of informally, which I think was another mistake, informally, and saying, well, I could take on this job and do this job. And then how about thinking about moving me up to, at the time, I think it was 90 or something like that. And she just kind of like, and then she wrote me an email later saying that I was being greedy to ask for that, which was really surprising coming from another woman. I was, kind of thrown by that. But I kind of took a deep breath, regrouped, went ahead and kept going with my job. And then, by the way, she eventually left. And that was when I kind of restarted this negotiation for myself. So there are always other players. Sometimes you have to wait them out. Sometimes you have to find an advocate in the system to help you. But the best thing that you can do when you go into a negotiation is get all of your data together and clear. And that is, I really think that is at least 80% of the whole
and there's no
battle.
emotion in that data, right?
There's no emotion. There's no, why don't you like me and give me a raise? Like, don't you think I'm good? Give me a raise. And the data can be not only salary data, but it can also be data about yourself and your past performance. I've had these reviews for these 5 years. I've had all these accomplishments. I've done these new things in the position. I've taken on these jobs. And then it's also not as scary because you're just going in and presenting a case.
Right.
You're not pleading a case. You're presenting it.
Yeah. Such great tips. Oh, man. Anyone who needs help with negotiation, you're the queen to just have some second eyes on it. Or have you thought about this? And maybe this isn't enough. This isn't convincing. Like, because sometimes people think their argument is convincing and they really don't have any data. It's just feelings.
Just feelings, yep. And negotiation, I think, has the reputation of being feelings-based, but it's not. It's data-based.
Right, absolutely. And that's when we can knowing and doing the right thing feels good too. Like literally being able to give someone a raise because they deserve it, and it's just the system isn't, the system is not supporting it.
Yes.
Right? Or maybe the system does, and there's one cog in the wheel, and it's one boss that hasn't been supported. That sometimes the system itself is fine, but they don't know. You don't know when you're on the top, you're the president of, let's say, an organization, or you're an owner of the business. You don't know how your managers are treating your employees.
That's an unfortunate truth.
Yeah. And just because you have your values on the wall doesn't mean everybody's living them. And every little culture, every little building has its own culture. And every boss and every team, they have microcultures.
Absolutely true. Yes.
And so even though the organization or the institution or the whole picture has, this is how we are, that doesn't mean that's what's happening. Those are espoused values, but that doesn't mean that people are living them out, or they'll be even held accountable. Let's just be honest. If it's in higher ed or government, like they'll get away with it, right? Like, so that's part of the problems of the institutions and the larger organizations, and when we don't let people go.
Yeah. And I will say, that's one of the beauties of a small business, is that you can have a very high degree of impact over your culture, the work culture that you provide.
Absolutely.
You're way more power than you would have
in a system,
a huge corporation, or even a Idaho State University, for example. You said there's lots of different cultures within the same institution, and it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and I found that super interesting in hospitals too. And even same organization, St. Luke's, if I would go to Meridian, it would be different. Even the operating room, Meridian was different than downtown. Downtown was different. Like it would be so weird. And then you've got your operating room, and then you've got your ER. Like each department has its own culture and all these microcultures, and half of them aren't jiving with the leadership, and I saw that at ISU as well, you
Yeah.
know, and at BSU, CWI, like all of them. So
Yeah.
it's not like one is better than the other. It's just is.
Yes, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
It's just a phenomenon that happens with large organizations.
And the system is too big to address it all at once, and it can be fixed, but you got to have a lot of people on board.
Yes, you do, especially a lot of people at the top
Yeah.
and willing to have some tough conversations.
And let some
Back to
people
those
go.
tough conversations.
And let people go.
Yeah,
And
Yep.
that's, yeah.
don't need to deal with difficult people.
Right. If they're not
they
on
remain
board,
difficult.
or if they don't fit this culture.
Yeah, that's true too.
Because if we're trying to create a culture where people want to be, then we don't hold people back. We don't keep them, you know, from getting a raise and call them greedy. If they're advocating for themselves, right? It's that whole guilt and shame and all that kind of stuff. Like that's not. If they looked at the data and they said and it wasn't correct or something, then that would be a different thing. But when they have the data, and you're just advocating for you're asking for equality, and when that is a thing, I think everybody knows what the right thing to do in that instance is.
Yeah.
But if somebody's threatened by that and they decide to, you know, attack you, retaliate at you, you have no psychological safety. You know, fortunately for you, that person left. And then you were able to find a new path. So I think about our listeners that listen to this and think, what if I have a horrible boss and or they're ready for retirement. I had one of those that was ready for retirement, and they had already expired. They had already expired,
Okay.
but they were still there,
Yeah.
and they were trying to control everything. Like they were losing control of their life, so still trying to control everything, and it was miserable. But like you knew that there was an end. You didn't know what was going to be coming. You didn't know if it was going to be better or worse, but you just knew there was going to be an end to this, and hopefully it would get better after this.
Yeah.
So, and not everybody going into retirement is like that. So just know that some people, when they're leaving and they're going into retirement, it is a really sad day, and they're going to be highly missed. But this person wasn't one of them. There was going to be a parade.
Like a Wolf of Wall Street style parade.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it comes down to really knowing. And as a leader, as people who are listening and are leaders, sometimes, you know, asking yourself, am I holding this person back? What is my threat? Why can I not let this person shine? What is my part in this? Because I can guarantee that nobody thinks they're the bully. Nobody thinks they're the boss that that people are leaving because they what I hear a lot is things like they got more money, they don't like this, they're not loyal, blah, blah, blah. But you notice that they've had quite a bit of turnover. And it's like, sounds a lot like victim mindset. I see there's one common denominator here.
That's right. Victim mindset.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. And victim mindset is the trump card over teachability, over passion, and it kind of trumps everything.
It does. It keeps you just, this is the way it is, I'm right, and there's no
Yep. And
closed-mindedness.
those go in my difficult people pile. And very, deserving of tough conversations. And at some point, though, you've got to decide that that's not the kind of people you want to be around in the precious 4,000 weeks you've got to be on the planet.
No.
Yeah.
No, whether you're married to them or you work with
Yes,
them.
right.
It really comes down to, is this person, can we work together? Can we work together? Can we collaborate?
Yes.
Can we have conversations?
And you can do that with people you don't like. I
Yes,
do.
I do too, all the time.
And I don't classify them as difficult people because we can function. We are functional in the workplace. But
Difficult as in, when we're talking about difficult people, I think we're talking about somebody who blames others, doesn't take accountability, is not coachable, thinks it's everybody else. It's never them.
Right.
That's what I would define as a difficult person.
Yes. Yep.
There's
I
people,
probably would expand that definition
Yeah,
depending
yeah.
on who we're talking about.
yeah, but I
yeah.
mean, there's people that are really direct or blunt or not very diplomatic or tactful. That's different. Or we see things different. That's different than just being an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. I think difficult people are people who
Right.
just stop things from happening, stop anything from functioning, a relationship functioning, a task functioning,
Create chaos.
policy functioning. I mean, just it's sort of like, dysfunction is sort of tossed around as a catch-all, but it really is somebody who stops making things function well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They don't put the fun in dysfunction.
No, they don't.
They take it out.
Right.
All right. So we're at the time where I say, what do you wish Anne knew as a younger person? Like, what could you, if you could talk to yourself early on, what wisdom have you gleaned over these years in these variety of roles, which I had no idea you were a gerontologist?
Yeah. If I could go back and talk to my 25-year-old self, I would help her believe that she is right more often and far more capable than she thought she was. And I would remove the second guessing by about 50%. I don't think I would ever get rid of second guessing, but that's been a real gift of age for me.
Right.
Is that kind of internal solidity, kind of like I think of a tree trunk growing sturdier as it ages. That's been my real gift of age, and also understanding that I don't always need to be a human doing. I can be a human being.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's so hard for me to sit still. My intentions for the new year were less sugar and more meditation.
Nice.
And that's a real challenge.
How you doing?
I think the intention is there. I've had a couple good days, so we'll leave it at that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mine is meaningful. My word for the year is meaningful.
Meaningful.
And that means I want to do more things that are meaningful, say yes to more things that are meaningful, and no to things that aren't as meaningful to me. And so what you talked about being a human being and versus a human doing, that is one thing that I told Rob about, I don't know, a couple years ago. And I actually thought I coined it. Like, I was like, I'm going to be a human being instead of human doing. He's like, people say that. I'm like, no, they don't. I created that. No, but the funny part is that, yeah, we're in the rat race half the time. And we have to be intentional, especially as a business owner, because you don't get PTO or time off like you do in a state job or anything like that where you can take time.
That's right.
Yeah. And as a business owner, you better plan your calendar at the beginning of the year and decide when you will take things, when you will reflect how you're going to do things. Quarterly, you're going to need to take a break and step back, even though you think
You can't.
you think you can't, and you've told yourself all the stories and what will happen, and the reality is you'll be better because of it. You will actually come back more refreshed and dive in deeper. You'll also gain perspective because you'll be out of the weeds for a while. You'll be able to have more creativity. You'll actually meet somebody that can help you. You'll do something and you'll meet just the right person in the right time because you're not constantly doing. You step off the hedonic treadmill for just a week or two, and you just unplug and you put your freaking phone away and you don't look at it.
Hard to do, but necessary.
Necessary.
Yes, very necessary. A book that you and I both have read, I think, is a good one to mention here, and that's 4,000 Hours by Oliver Berkman.
Yes.
That has become, saying things like, that's my new Bible, is a little cliche, but I've read it twice, and I've only had it 3 months.
Yeah.
And that really drove home. I think that book is the Human Being, Human Doing mentions that too. But it's a really new take or a different take on time management.
Right.
And I just recommend it for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I need to read it again because it blew my mind
Yeah.
where time came from and how we got down this path and all the things and how we become
Yes.
such slaves to the clock.
Yes,
And
yeah.
there were
And
so
it's
many.
unique in our culture and time, too.
Yeah.
It hasn't always been like that.
Yeah, it was super cool. I love that. I love discussing with you. I actually think we need to have another conversation on aging.
Let's do
because,
it. I'd love to do that.
Because it's something that I'm really passionate about and helping people through that transition and helping myself. And especially with your gerontologist background.
Yeah.
And, we're about the same age. I think we are the same age-ish. So, I mean, we're experiencing life parallelly, like where we are. And I think there's some real gifts to it. And I'm actually in this phase of life where I'm starting to embrace aging, pro-aging instead of anti-aging.
I know it really got my hackles up when I saw an ad for face cream, and they had like a 14-year-old girl. When's the best time for you to start? And there's this like woman and her daughter, and I'm like, can't we just let the 14-year-olds be 14 with their
Right.
acne and their hair do's, and let's just
Can we not?
can we not with that, please?
Yeah.
So I would really enjoy that conversation. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas to explore.
Yeah, I look forward to that conversation.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to
Yeah, you're welcome.
and thank you for listening to the Leader You podcast. If you found this message helpful, please share it and be sure to like and subscribe. The more listeners we get, the better off it helps us, and it helps to share all of these amazing guests and all of their wisdom. So thank you so much.
Thank you.